Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of That Early Childhood Nerd. I'm Heather Burnt Santee, and as I just shared with the co-hosts, I'm super hyper caffeinated today, so ready to go. And today, the co-hosts are Tiffany Pearsall
That's me.
and Lizz Nolasco.
Hello.
Yay. So we've been trying to decide what to record about for the last several minutes. Last night, Tiffany messaged our group and said, I need a nerd rant right now. And I said, okay, log in at noon and we'll figure out what to talk about. So the three of us are the ones who logged in at noon. So we've decided we're going to talk about a quote from a book called The Commodification of American Education. And it's edited by T. Jameson Brewer and William Gregory Harman. And here's our quote. Commodification is the rendering of people or things into items of economic exchange, reducing humans and humanity into objects, and attaching human value to economic metrics. Okay, while I type that quote into the chat box so you guys can refer to it, talk about what that means. How does that connect to early childhood, or what are we doing here?
I mean, it's talking about career readiness for preschoolers.
God. My department head got, maybe I shouldn't have identified him that clearly, but he got I think his daughter is in second grade, and they got a brochure sent home from school the other day about how they can start working to get her career ready.
Ouch.
Just the idea that we're all here to produce for the GDP. I mean, sorry, I don't want to go fully and
we're here for a nerd rant.
Yeah, Tiffany's gonna go hard anti-capitalist, so you might as well. Okay, so seriously, I'm typing the quote in the chat box.
It's so long. So it's like our only value is monetary value?
Yeah.
Is that the only thing we're worth now?
Yeah. It's sort of, I mean, it's absolutely what oh my gosh, what's his name? Oh, it's right here. Peter Moss talks about when he's talking about finding alternative narratives to talk about early childhood education and the shortcomings of trying to talk about quality and define quality, because it always comes down to an economic argument, right? All of our advocacy comes down to, well, you get, $1 billion back for every $3 you put into childcare now, or that you invest now. And it's all about, the conversation is never, here are very young children who, through no agency over themselves, are thrown into these group situations and are being cared for in these in childcare centers and family childcare homes or whatever. And we don't think that, well, they're just children who deserve the best isn't a compelling enough argument. So we have to say, yeah, we get some economic value out of this if we do things for these children now. It's not like, oh, they're humans who deserve good quality of life now.
And I think of it too as the devaluing of art, right? Art and music. I mean, I think having worked in a pretty wide variety of settings at this point in my career, there's such a difference between the families that are seeking out art and music and drama versus the families who believe that line about, or I'm not that other families don't believe the line, but this idea of early childhood as career readiness and school readiness and preparation for life instead of a part of life.
Yeah.
There's such a difference between the people who are seeking the economic stability, not all, this is a very broad generalization, but people who want that economic stability for themselves, for their children, and people who can just count on economic stability and have the luxury of art and music.
Yeah, they already have that stability, so they don't need to advocate for it for their own children.
Exactly. And they're not as vulnerable to this marketing of the earlier is better, and the sooner your child is reading, the sooner they'll be able, they'll have this leg up. And I mean, even the name Head Start at this point feels so grossly competitive, which I'm sure is not what it was intended to be, but
yeah, no, it definitely wasn't what it was intended to be. But you're right, it has that, I don't know, just the whole argument that the only thing that matters is our economic value, just really makes me sort of sick. And I talk a lot when I'm teaching or on podcasts or when I used to do trainings and stuff. I talk a lot about the ways that our childcare systems, settings, places, whatever, dehumanize children and adults for some, also that's a different conversation or a different a point for later. But and it always comes across as sounding so harsh. And every time I use the word, even though I firmly believe that even a daily schedule, what's broken down into 20-minute increments or whatever, has a dehumanizing effect. Our diaper changing practices many times have a dehumanizing effect. This whole economic conversation has the same kind of potential impact. And people are always like, oh, how dare you say that? We're good people. And it's not that every adult working with young children is dehumanizing on purpose. Like, we don't wake up and say, how can I take children's humanity from them today? There's a little box on my lesson plan for dehumanizing activities. Like, it's not that's the case, but just the whole sort of capitalist setup, factory model contributes to that.
And it's just ingrained in our teacherisms at this point too. The same way that I drop a motorcycle in a car as a she, like, you just do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's so much of it that is just how you interact with a large group of anything that suddenly they become dehumanized through needing to push the widgets from A to B. Like, eventually, if you're stuck in that system, which we all have been since birth,
yeah,
like, that's just how our brains are wired at this point. I also think that there's a part of it, so spending lots of time in local government lately, there's a part of it that you have to justify every single decision in such an intensely large scale so quickly that if you can't put money to why, no one will agree with you and move the needle.
Mm-hmm.
And you only have 4 years to make that argument. So you have to do the biggest bang for your buck as fast as you can before somebody else gets voted in. And so that, like, the inability to, like, truly have a long range vision for what we want our children to have in America is totally because of our stupid capitalist society.
Okay, so
like, the way that our government works, like, puts this childhood amnesia to play every 4 years in the voting cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, then that's true. I mean, I know that that's true. And it's kind of like so I just did this presentation at the IPA USA thing in Texas, and about schema play, of course, because that's all I talk about anymore. But we talked about how there are some people who think we need to stop defending play. We need to just say, we just need to do it or whatever. But the reality is there are people that we have to be able to convince. So we do have to defend play. And we do have to advocate, and you have to fine tune your advocacy message to the specific audience you're talking about. And I think that's kind of the same thing you're describing, Tiffany, where there is this political game that we have to play. So if it's a 4-year cycle, and so far it has seemed pretty hopeless, there's not much getting accomplished over the several 4-year cycles that I've been part of as an adult. Why should we keep caring about it? Like, what's the argument to keep?
Mostly because it keeps getting worse. I mean,
yeah.
One of the best books in my collection is a children's book called When Will I Read? And at the end of this little book meant for very young children, it's revealed that this is a first grade classroom where the children are not yet reading and not yet expected to read.
Oh.
And I bust that out every kindergarten night.
Well, I have to write that
for our
down.
families
Yeah.
to,
Putting it in my cart now.
Yep.
oh gosh, I don't know if it's still available. It was from a garage sale. God knows how long
Oh,
ago.
I'll find it
but-
used. Don't you worry.
All right. But it's just so
okay.
pervasive. I mean, from the time that I was, starting school 20 years ago, it's just this, no, 30 years
how
ago.
old are-
I don't
how
know what
old are
time
you?
is.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm 33, 30 years ago. There's just been such an increase in the standardized testing, and that's been federal down, right? This
Yeah.
race to the top and no child left behind. And it's just keeps getting worse on these kids. We're under all of this intense pressure to not just keep up, but surpass their peers in all areas.
And that's where that language of competition and commodification circles back around to, that like every moment of our days are competition.
Yeah.
And not
that's
just
so yucky.
who's gonna get the best test score, or who's gonna wash their hands the fastest, who's gonna be the first one in line.
Yes.
Like that is so ingrained in our culture that it's, unless you're actively fighting against it, that's just the
Right.
that's
Right.
just, the hands don't make sense in podcast form. That's just what's happening.
There'll be a
From the
video.
top down.
When
It's
the
just
video
this.
comes out, they'll see your hands.
Coming from all sides.
Yeah, the whole thing about competition is, I think, important to the discussion of commodifying, because that's selling, right? That's having a product to sell. And you want to be the one who's selling the most product. Like that's just, and the same thing with standardized testing. There have to be people who don't do well on the test for the test to be seen as valuable. Like if everyone did well on the whatever metric we use to measure
It wouldn't be
children's lives, there wouldn't be, like, no one would buy that test anymore, because clearly it's not, or we'd say, well, this program is clearly not rigorous enough, or all those words that we use when we're talking about these kinds of competitions.
Right. I was thinking about the American obsession interest with big trucks and guns and powerful things the other day, and how it kind of links to this finding power where you can and finding agency where you can.
Okay.
And just this idea of it's all a competition, so I'm going to win at the way that I'm good at this.
Oh, okay.
And just this idea of, rather than valuing each person as a person, commodifying them, right? Like the quote says, into what they can do for you and what they can demonstrate and prove. It just kind of, in my mind at least, is as a natural link to this idea of needing more power and more force and more visible excess. And I don't know how much that also ties into the rampant American consumerism as a whole. I feel like it probably does.
Yeah.
Just this idea of being able to ostentatiously demonstrate how well you have done.
Yeah, because we're just always, there's just always that element of competition. The whole, go ahead, Tiff.
Can we coin a new phrase today?
Please.
I think we should call it the toddler economy.
The what?
Because it's just toddler economy.
Okay.
It's just mine, more. And you don't get the socialization and the time to work through that, and you're that your whole life. Like, how do you learn and like develop your empathy, and how do you care about groups of people that aren't you? Like, if you're not given those opportunities, like our whole economy is that. This is not to poop on toddlers. I don't want to be
I was going to say, can we put an asterisk on that?
Yeah. But like toddlers aren't meant to be silos by themselves. Like you need that experience. You need that social network. You need those grown-ups around you. Like if you don't have that, this is where we end up. Because all you want to do is teach them flashcards and how to read. Like they also need to know how to love babies
Sure.
and how to like care for their family.
Yeah.
And care for people that aren't in their family.
Yeah, even the sort of newish push for SEL, social emotional learning, is commodified. Like, it's not really about social and emotional development and understanding where children are and what they need. It's compliance, it's behavior management, it's how to dehumanize you back into the group when your humanity makes you inconvenient to me.
Oh, absolutely. It's never emotional or social development for its own means. It's within the classroom setting. It's you need to teach your child how to identify their emotions so they can tell me when they're mad. Well, if they're throwing a chair, they're probably mad.
Yeah, they're telling you that they're mad. Yeah, for sure. So this podcast is kind of weird because neither of you are interrupters or talker overs like many of my other guests. So I'm pausing longer than usual and I get really uncomfortable and then one of you will start to talk.
I'm also like out of podcast shape. I have not been on podcast in a while, so
yeah,
it's nice to be back.
Yay.
Yay.
Okay, so I'm gonna look at the quote again and just see what else this brought to mind for me. So can we talk about this in the adult context of early childhood education? The idea that rendering people or things into items of economic exchange, reducing humans and humanity into objects, attaching human value to economic metrics.
Pedagogy of care versus the pedagogy of academics.
Okay, talk more about that, Liz.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, I think it's just that there's been this semi-focus on the idea of soft skills, right? But it's just like Tiffany was saying, where we don't value people learning how to get along or learning to care for each other, or I'm even going to argue not learning to care for each other, but just not suppressing the natural human urge to care for each other.
Yeah.
Because I think that's what it is. I think it's being suppressed rather than not taught. I mean, if you look into the toddler, I'm going to brag on my kid for a second. I'm sorry, I have to.
Yeah.
He's 20 months old, and I swear every other day when I peek into the toddler room, he's got somebody's water bottle that he is feeding them. These are all children who are capable of holding their own water bottles, but he needs to give them the water.
Yeah. Allison Gopnik would love that.
It's just a natural urge, you know. But we suppress it. We say no, there are germs, and
right.
Full disclosure, I don't love that he's touching other people's water bottles, but
yeah.
But we keep children from doing these things for each other because worry about yourself, or
yeah,
it's inconvenient, or you're in the way, or
it's not time for water bottles yet.
Right.
Yeah.
The one that gets me the most is when a kid gets hurt and you're like, no, give him space, leave him alone. It's like, no, go get him water. Go get a water bottle. Go get a cold wet paper towel. Like, go say that you love him. Like, fine.
Yes.
Is this also where the side hustle culture comes in?
Yes. Yeah. Go ahead and talk about side hustle culture.
That
because I'm so guilty of it.
It makes me, as we're on a side hustle podcast, but it's like making a million things for teachers pay teachers, because you're like so good at STEM education, buy my worksheet packet on mushrooms, like that side hustle isn't. Can you tell what I look for at Teachers Pay Teachers?
Yeah.
Is kind of a niche.
Yeah.
But I just need nice watercolor mushroom pictures for my classroom. But like that.
Oh, I was worried you were talking about mushroom identification.
That
there are much more trustworthy resources than teachers.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway.
But that whole side hustle culture is like entirely based on commodifying learning and children, right? The part of it is that, guess what? We don't make enough as educators to have a choice but to have a side hustle at all times. So like, I get that. And then part of that is I'm excited and feel good about, and I'm proud of what I do. So I want to share it and make money
Right.
off of it, whatever. At the
Or
end of the
do it for
day, we
free.
are doing the exact same thing for our own profit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's hard.
Well, I guess that's the end of the podcast.
I feel like it has to be, though. I mean, I think there are so many ways to provoke thought and conversation that aren't commodification.
Right. Right.
But I mean,
yeah,
you're right. It's certainly easier to put together a packet of worksheets that have worked for your class, and of course, they'll work for everybody else. You know.
Yeah. Right.
Mhm.
I think I think I've really noticed a boom in this area, and this is probably not unique or original thinking. So I'm not thinking, oh, as a side hustle scholar, this is what I've. But anyway,
like, Heather, is your side hustle super lucrative?
No.
I feel like that's it's not a side hustle.
Yeah, I know. Feel the need to clarify that the podcast makes $0, and I in fact pay some dollars to keep it going. So, but anyway, I noticed early childhood people who did like blogs or just Facebook pages that I really liked and appreciated and learned from over COVID. That really became sort of commodified and turned into products you can buy from me a lot of times, or suddenly everyone's taking like influencer classes, social media influencer classes, which is cool. I mean, like if I had more energy and motivation, that would be something that I probably would really enjoy. But anyway, I just feel like I watched it maybe out of necessity, maybe just out of having a lot of time to think about and develop new things, more of a commodification of ideas, and sort of networking and sharing through social media, over the last couple of years than I had seen before.
But I think that's where we need to figure out the line, I guess, between
Yeah.
commodifying and sharing, because I think they are two distinct concepts.
Uh-huh.
I don't think it devalues someone's work to get paid for it, but I do think that obviously money can influence the way someone operates, and that can in turn impact their work.
Well, and so maybe that's what I wasn't clear enough about when I was talking, like the message has changed as the message has gotten sort of more neutral, or just less bold, maybe, because it's been turned into a product now rather than a sharing of ideas. Does that make sense?
Right, that makes sense. Yeah.
I think there's also a ledge that hits where you're sharing to this audience for authentic reasons. And not to say that it doesn't stay authentic, right? But you reach this point where your audience shifts, and suddenly the people that are listening to you are a very different group of people, right?
Yeah.
Like it used to be, I'm sharing this with educators that want to learn how to do this better and don't want to commodify. And now it's like, if everyone is listening to me and I say the same things, it's going to be taken in a weird way, right?
Yeah.
I think that there's a level that hits where you have to change your message because you're not talking to the same people.
That's true.
Do you think it's kind of like a sine wave though, where it gets more intense and less intense as you get a broader audience, then you intensify again?
Yeah.
Once you've got your safe space, kind of.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That could be.
We just talked about this with business growth and like school growth, right? When you're small and you only have a few teachers, like you get to a point where you're making money, when I say making money, I'm a nonprofit.
Yeah.
So when I say making money, we're making payroll every month and no one's vomiting at how scary that is.
Right. That's what we all know.
We buy the new playground toys. It's lovely. And then you think, oh, if we open another classroom, like it'll stay at this sustainable way. But really, there's that ledge, that cliff in between where like you're going to hit a point where you have too many teachers and not enough kids, but you need a certain number of teachers to reach that same sustainability that you had when you were 2 teachers in the classroom kicking butt and taking names, right? Like I think that happens with I don't know how we got stuck on side hustle, but like I think that happens with side hustle and people in the field that are speaking out and, trying to advocate for change. I think that same cycle happens there too.
Yeah. So I'm going to throw a quote from the next page in here
Ooh.
now. It's not super
Read the
different,
book
but
with-
what?
The next nerd podcast is you just reading the book to us while we
Yeah.
sit like this.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Probably that's not legal. But
But look, I'm sitting crisscross applesauce.
So I know you're learning. Eyes on me. Okay, so let's see. So to objectify is to render a subject into the value not in and of itself, but into value for the use of others. For instance, a tree is a living being, and each one is a unique entity, a subject of its own. When someone looks at it and sees the lumber they will get from it, the tree has been rendered into an object. Does that add any new direction to the conversation, do you think? Or is that just saying the same thing differently when we're talking about working with young children?
I think we all inherently understand that quote because we identify as women.
Oh. What's that mean, Tiffany?
We're all like, yeah, of course. We know, yeah. We've been objectified 1,000 million times.
Right, yeah. Yeah.
But yes, like,
I was objectified and I was just fine.
Look at the population of people with the power to make change in our country, in our local government.
Yeah.
We might not understand that quote.
Yeah. So, but bring it down to like an individual program or an individual classroom, because I think, I mean, those are usually women, and still really struggle to see, play is a good example. I don't think the children are getting anything out of it, so I can't just let them play. Like there's no value unless I can get something out of it, something for my use out of what I'm letting children do or not do. I think falls into this commodification and objectification conversation.
Ooh, this ties in really nicely to a conversation I had with a teacher the other day. She was talking about
how good, because I didn't know where I was going to go.
she was talking about how, she's my toddler teacher, she's amazing. Talking about how she loves the job, she loves being with the children, and she hates writing newsletters and writing all this information for parents about what the kids are doing. And I said, well, you're so good at it. You've got such a strong theoretical base. Like, I'm so surprised to hear that. And she said, yeah, but my job is to be with children. Like, I value the parents. They're wonderful, but my job is with the children. I don't care about producing for them.
Oh, okay.
That wasn't quite what she said. So I don't want to malign her at all. But I mean, she's so disinterested in making those theory practice connections for the parents to see, because they're both because they're self-evident and because she's worried that it devalues her work of being with the children. She's worried that by making those connections, by saying they're learning X, Y, Z, she's devaluing herself and her role and the children as people.
Yeah. So
there's a way to do documentation without devaluing.
Okay.
I'm raising my hand.
Yeah, go.
Hand raiser. I would argue that your teacher has not found the medium in which she translates her experience. She doesn't translate her experience to written word. And once she finds the medium, it will not devalue. It will like skyrocket how she feels about her time in the classroom, because she will simply be translating her experience in a way that is now visible to other people.
Ooh, thank you.
And that's not always right.
But that's the thing. So she and I can talk for hours. Like I usually have to cut her off because she's so excited about what's going on. But you're right. It's just the medium that must be not like, it must be so much more interactive, I guess, than just preaching. Maybe that's the trick.
Yeah. I was like, what is this reminding me of? But it's reminding me of an episode I just recorded with Carol about learning stories. that will come out a couple weeks before this one if I send them to Jeff in the right order. So I mean
this ties in perfectly to our commodification argument, though.
Yeah.
writing and blogs and books, like that is how we see ourselves as educators represented in the field being successful. And like, whatever, if the way that you translate is a song or talking to a friend or talking to your parents about it, I can't sell that in the same way that I can easily sell a blog or a book like that. I think that that's part of it. And why we feel we have to write everything down is like, if I don't write it down, then there's no documentation or receipt that I am doing something that is worth something else.
The idea of receipts for what we're doing is interesting. I know that's, you know, Lisa talks about that, you know, with the artwork or whatever being a receipt for what the children did at school at the program that day. But for adults, receipts for adults, what did you start to say, Tiffany?
Well, I think that that's another fine line between commodification. Is this a receipt of our transaction? You know, I taught your children, I give you this, or is it a reflection of our practice today? Is it sharing our experience? Is it, no, I lost my train of thought.
Well, or is it part of being in a community that cares for that child? Like, you know, whatever, you know, Josie's a preschooler or whatever. So yeah, my job is to be with Josie, and to understand the theory and be able to use that in my work with Josie. But then when I somehow find a way that works for me to share that with the family, then it's part of creating that community that's all working together for Josie.
Yeah.
But as someone who loves to write, that's hard for me because I'm like, yeah, just do a newsletter. Like that.
Right.
Get over it and do a newsletter. I know. I'm sorry, Tiffany. About your
that's what I was
writing.
going to say, that it's the difference between a receipt and validation, right? Parents in your care need validation that you love their child as much as, or not as much as they do. You'll never love them, but that you also love their child and care for their child. And we get to set the tone as educators. How will I share that with you? How will I validate you? How will you feel like you're a part of your child's life, even if they're here for 10 hours a day?
Yeah.
Versus, here's a receipt. See you later. Bye.
Sure. So okay.
There's another elephant in the room, though.
Oh, what?
Guess what? This is a business. We have to make money.
Yeah.
The parents pay us money to do the business job. Like, that's the side that's hard, where we can't compete with public schools the same way, because there is this end of the day, I pay you money every month. Show me what you're doing. Right?
Yeah.
There's that inherent commodification because of how the industry is built right now in our country. I'm just gonna leave it at that.
I know. I was waiting for Liz because I was sure she'd have something. So,
well, I'm just thinking about backfilling in the public schools, because that's been my kind of thing turning around in my head lately. How do we, rather than bringing early childhood into the public schools, how do we make the public schools more like early childhood, right? And not with the commodification piece, but being ready to receive the children who have, in a perfect world, ready to receive whichever children come to us, and accommodating working parents, right? Everyone talks about how hard it is to be a working parent when your child is an infant. What about when they're 5 and they're only at school for 5 hours a day and there's no aftercare available? You know, how do we make it with that COVID narrative of we're teachers, not babysitters, and that narrative of teachers as part of the broader community, because we've really lost a lot of the close family, quote unquote, village ties just by virtue of capitalism, right? Moving where the jobs are, moving where your industry is, and just bringing that family support in a way that used to be just baked into your neighborhood, right? So, Johnny would go to school, he'd go home, spend a couple hours with grandma, and then mom and dad would get home from work, right? But we don't have that anymore. Parents have to pay for the before and after care in preschool. And just being ready for who's received, and how it's just such a failing of our country and our communities that these are commodities and businesses to be paid for rather than expectations, the way, the public schools are.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know I've talked about this on other episodes, and I've had the author on the show once, but there's a book by Elliot Haspel called Crawling Behind America's Childcare Crisis and How to Fix It. And ultimately, and I think maybe he's changed his position a little bit on a couple of things just by following him on Twitter. Since then, it came out a few years ago. But anyway, his basic assertion is that childcare should be seen as a public good, like school is, but not run like school is, and that school could learn some things. So I'm just going to throw that out there in case anyone wants to go read that book, and then contact their decision makers and increase their skill at talking about why because the argument is always, well, I don't need childcare, so why should I care about childcare? Or, the old white guys making the decisions haven't ever had to really rely on childcare to get to work or something. So anyway, I think that's a good resource that we can utilize in this sort of argument or defense of what we're doing.
I do wonder too, if we offered families more paid family leave, more guaranteed vacation time, the way other countries do, how much that would change, right? If families who got to had the luxury of spending more time with their children without sacrificing their salaries, how much that would change our role as needing to demonstrate what we're doing rather than giving the parents that luxury of just more time with their children. And
or oh gosh, what's it called? It's not universal income, is it? Where everybody just gets
universal basic income?
Universal basic income, I think. Will never happen probably, but that would also, even, every parent benefits from that. And every employer would benefit from that, and every employee would benefit.
I see it's definitely more than just a childcare problem. We're setting our closure days for the following year, and we're going to have to close the whole school and move the whole school at a certain point. So we're talking about how many days do we need to do that? And one of our board members said, our closure days are more days than I have paid time off this year. I'm not the only one. How does the family make rent if you're closed more than their PTO? And so it is more than just a teaching problem. It's a whole country paid leave problem. Because if people had 4 weeks of paid leave every year, guess what? Our teachers would get 4 weeks of paid leave.
I don't get vacation time. I get the breaks between semesters, but I don't get to choose when my vacation time is. So that would be hard for me too, as a person with a pretty good job and pretty good income. I still would struggle if I had children in childcare right now.
Yeah.
Well, that was a downer.
Commodification sucks.
Yes, there we go. Commodification equals suck. That's our new thing. Something equals suck.
We're not sprockets, we're human.
Except for Toad and the Wet Sprocket.
They are humans.
They're the exception.
Excellent point. I'm sure that will be relatable to a huge chunk of the audience. Maybe Toad listens. Okay, what else? Anything else, or you feel like we've done this one? Did you get enough ranting? Did you get enough nerding, Tiffany? This was all about you and your needs.
We've dipped a toe. I'm here all day, folks.
All right. Well, I'm going to wrap this episode up, and then we can all stay on if we need to. But thank you both for being on today, and also just for your amazing, flexible, brilliant brains who can show up not knowing what we're talking about and wait for me to pull something off my bookshelf and then just go and have a really smart conversation. You're both awesome. Okay, so this was another episode of That Early Childhood Nerd. Thanks for being here, and come back again next week.